Welcome back. So why does the city of Sarasota own so many properties, and why doesn't it charge significant rent for some of the prime properties it rents out for the next to nothing, like the Garden Club? Why does the city continue to own the Bobby Jones golf course, which has been a money loser for many years? And finally, why doesn't the city unload at least some of the properties at a time when it's running a deficit in its parking fund? Well, let's ask the Sarasota city manager, Tom Barwin, and Zach Murdoch of the Herald Tribune. Tom, let's start with the Bayfront properties. Yeah. And you heard the argument that this is prime real estate. Right. In some cases, like the Garden Club, you're only getting like $1 a year. Mm-hmm. Make the case for why you should not charge market rent for those properties.
Well, the case is that the city acquired these properties, this 42 acres on the Bayfront, decades ago, through submerged land laws here in the state of Florida, which actually originate at the federal government and then are passed down to the state. In our agreements that are in place with the state boards that oversee this property is that the properties are restricted to public service type of organizations. You can't have commercial properties on there unless they're affiliated or associated with some major public sector, public service, not-for-profit group. That's why we've had the Sarasota County Library on that site. That's why the Gee Whiz was there. These were not-for-profits, educational type of facilities. And the Garden Club is kind of in that sort of general vein.
So you could not charge more than what in terms of rent for the Garden Club?
That's my understanding. I mean, we may be able to eke a few more dollars out of folks like that. But these are social centers. These are activities where people get together, where they gather to share their knowledge about plants and flowers. And, you know, that's spread throughout the community. We have a more beautiful community because of it. People are healthier when they socialize. And where all of this is rooted, it's sort of a way to protect the waterfront for the public. Not everything along the waterfront should be privatized. These laws were put in place decades and centuries ago to allow the public access for fishing, for boating, for swimming, and that's the kind of understanding that the city went into when they acquired the land. Now, so that's the foundation for that arrangement.
Are the properties that we're talking about the properties that are included in what used to be known recently to the Bayfront 2020 project?
These are all included in that 42 acres, and there is an organization now, the Sarasota Bayfront Planning Organization, that has just hired a planning firm, Sasaki, I believe out of the Boston area, who will be in town very soon to begin a major planning effort of that Bayfront. And they're looking at all those leases, all those organizations, and how to integrate them with the future.
Zach, you heard Martin Hyde in Ray's story there talk about the Garden Club or the outside bowling property. Is he a lone voice out there in terms of raising these questions?
Well, to be totally honest, in a lot of ways, yes. I think he is. He does reflect some of kind of the financial concern, I guess you could say, that people will often bring up as a way to criticize the city, the current city commission. I mean, we just finished up the budget process. That's why a lot of this stuff is on people's minds. But when it comes to those specific properties, you don't often hear that exact type of criticism of why don't you charge the lawn bowlers a whole bunch more money. They are, in a lot of ways, a historic piece of that property. They've been there for decades and decades and decades.
75, 80 years.
There you go, yeah.
We are just getting warmed up, and we'll have much more on this after we check the First Alert weather, so stay with us. Welcome back. We're talking about the city of Sarasota's portfolio of properties. Joining us is Sarasota City Manager Tom Barwin and Zach Murdoch of the Herald Tribune. Here's another issue, the Bobby Jones golf course, which over the last couple of years has fallen into disrepair. It has either been losing money or not making as much money. Maybe, Bob, Tom, you could explain that to us. And the question has come, why not just get rid of it and make the city money, especially when the city needs money for other things?
Well, the Bobby Jones golf course has been here almost 100 years. I think it first opened in the 20s, if I'm recalling that accurately. It's sort of a legacy asset here in the city, and municipal golfing has a special niche for many people. It's more affordable. Youth can go out and play. Senior citizens can play. We have 45 holes there. It's a tremendous piece of property. The course was in the black for the most part until the last handful of years, maybe 5 years or so. And it was, as you said, Alan, probably due to not reinvesting enough. We get too much rain, we have to close or curtail operations out there until the course drains. Some of the greens got to be in bad shape during the Great Recession. We didn't have the resources to reinvest. We're beginning to do that now. We still have 100,000 rounds of golf there played every year. It's a very busy course. Many of the courses that are closing around the country are those that were designed around neighborhoods and residential developments. They're kind of exclusive. So this has a special niche here, and it's 200 acres of prime environmental property, protect us for future storms, protect us for backup drinking wells, wildlife, trees, clean the environment, and that's what the commissions have gone on record on. We're going to keep this in the public domain in perpetuity for all of those reasons.
But some commissioners have raised that question, including Hagen Brody, who told you, Zach, I believe we have to be realistic here. The facts are that golf is in decline. We are not trying to save golf, and I don't see us creating a world-renowned destination. We're trying to provide the public course at an affordable price that it's quality course that people can enjoy playing on. So obviously there are at least members of the commission who are raising the specter in terms of how much money the city is investing in it. Right.
Well, Hagen Brody was really blushing at the idea pitched, I guess that would have been a month ago, maybe a little bit longer, from the golf architect, Richard Mandel, who came down and did a study of what it would take to revamp Bobby Jones Golf Course to really do the platinum top of the line upgrades. The price tag really winds up about $21.4 million. And that's what Commissioner Brody's really balking at there, is that not only is it a really, really big piece of property, but it's a huge price tag to fix it up completely. And even if you did want to dial back a lot of those upgrades, the commission made clear they're most interested in doing stormwater type upgrades, because it is a very, very important stormwater property for the city, right there with Philippi Creek. Even those get into the $9, $10, $12 million range.
Right, but the essential question is, at a time when the city does need money for so many different things, whether it's the pension fund or the parking fund and so forth, don't you have to make tough choices? And it is not always an easy snap of the fingers to solve some of these problems. Here you have a big publicly owned piece of land, which if you sold it, could net the city the money to pay for all the things that the city does not have the money currently to pay for.
Well, the city commission has tough decisions, tough choices to make every other Monday night. They weigh these things in their decision-making process, and the way the commissions have come out over the decades is they wish to preserve this property mostly for environmental reasons, but also for the legacy of municipal golf. But say, we have a different view of that. What would be done there? Would it be residential development? Would it be commercial development? How much more traffic would that add? How much more impervious pavement would that add? What kind of implications are that for the bay and traffic in the neighborhoods around there? Most of the community seems to be weighing in and say, they like having 200 plus acres of open space where the birds can come in and out and wildlife can habitate there.
Well, I think this gets to an interesting question that Ray's report starts to raise, is that it's not only about necessarily the leases that the garden club might charge, but when you talk about the city owning so many of these properties and frankly what citizens want from each of these properties, there are really big price tags that the city and Mr. Barwin and the commissioners have to start to deal with. I mean, Bobby Jones is one example. We haven't talked too much about the Bayfront 2020 group turning into the Bay project. That also is going to have an enormous price tag over by Marina Jack and O'Leary's. You all just invested in the seawall.
Well, I think
those
the
are types
thing
of
to
investments.
really remember when you start talking about how to finance things, and this is a part of what we as staff do and the commission does, is we look for partners, we look for creative ways to address opportunities. This city represents 3% of the geography of Sarasota County. This city is about 20% of the tax base of Sarasota County, and we're a huge donor to the state of Florida. So, there are people who should be at the table with us. We're a city of 25 square miles of 60,000 people, but we're kind of the center city of a metropolitan region now that's 750,000 people strong between our two counties.
Well, what do you mean that there are people who should be at the table with us? I mean, are you saying that there are people who should be joining in this conversation who are not?
Well, I think we will be reaching out to potential partners for these upgrades. I mean, we are now, and the city went through this 50 years ago when the Van Wezel was developed, when many of the amenities we enjoy around town were developed. A lot of these came online 50 years ago. So we're at that 50-year cycle, it seems. It's almost a natural cycle where people are ambitious, they're looking forward to the next 50 years. And, you know, this is an awesome community. How many top 10 lists can we be on? Something is going very right, and it's these kind of collaborations that have helped.
Zach, you have a longer perspective in terms of some of these properties. Marina Jack has always been pointed out. Is the city, you know, getting enough rental money for that property as it should? But the fact of the matter is the city's hands are somewhat tied because of litigation.
Right. Well, Marina Jack is an interesting example to be included in that report. And I know Mr. Hyde often talks about that, like Ray highlighted, but Marina Jack specifically goes back many decades. I mean, twice my age, basically, in terms of the lease it's had with the city, the many years and many different versions of litigation that lease has been through. The city does collect, based on the way all of those cases turned out, does collect a certain amount of rent from it. And you do hear critics specifically about Marina Jack's talking about how much rent money the city does ultimately get back, but maybe Mr. Barlow can talk about it.
The city gets 3% of the gross, and they're responsible for the capital improvements on the site. And we had a retail consultant in here a couple of years ago who said most of our business arrangements where we do get much more than $1 a year, we're in the right zone. So we do have business enterprises. We do charge market rate leases for many properties. Madison's downtown is a leased property. Salty Dog out on the city island is a leased property. Some of the concession stand at the golf course, under Eloise Worland Park there, under the bridge is a concession. We have several concessions, and those are market rates. And the city has sold property over the years. In 2011, 2012, the city sold thousands of acres of property outside of the land that had been reserved for potential water sources for $20 million, and we've reinvested that in the city.
And I'm going to continue on that line of thought, but we have to take another quick break, and we'll have final thoughts when we return. Stay with us. And our guests join us right now for final thoughts. And Zach, I'm pretty much going to ask you both the same question, because the headline here is over 200 properties. And the question becomes, is what is Sarasota doing when it has so many other things it needs to spend money on and pay for? Wouldn't it be a good idea to sell off some of these properties to pay for that? What kind of ongoing conversation do you see amongst the City Commission and others on this issue?
Right. Well, the City Commission does talk about this relatively regularly. They're often trying to figure out what it is they want to do with the property. There have been some conversations about affordable housing on city-owned properties lately. They're really not alone in this either. The County Commission just in the last few weeks and months has had extensive discussions about this same stuff. They deal with this all over the area. I want to say the county actually owns maybe a third of the land in unincorporated county. It's very much the same type of ratio. It's a huge number that you wouldn't necessarily expect, and so the local governments are kind of always going through a tug and pull about whether they want to sell or keep.
Tom, I know you're saying that you're always selling property and that, you know, there's an ebb and flow to that, but one of the major issues in Sarasota and Sarasota County is affordable housing, and shouldn't there be more of an emphasis to at least to use some of this property, sell it to people who might develop affordable
definitely
housing?
the Commission will be taking this up in the next few weeks, the next couple of months or so, but I think the number is a little misleading. Of the 200 properties, 90 properties are lift stations. They're sanitary sewage pumping operations. We have 50 parks, so we're up to almost 140, 150 properties there. We have fire halls, we have wastewater treatment plants, we have water treatment, we have City Hall. You know, we have about 25 miscellaneous lots that will be considered for affordable housing, but you know, we've made some strategic investments over the years, I think rather brilliantly. Within the last 2 years, we were able to help Ringling College expand and build a soundstage because we had a piece of property that they needed, and we were able to do a swap. We helped Sarasota Memorial Hospital open up a new internal medicine health clinic where they're training future doctors on MLK. It's a huge success, both economically and in that community. We've got a 13-acre industrial park or commerce park that we've just gotten our environmental clearance on. We'll be using that to create jobs. So there is not a lot of idle property out there.
And we'll have to leave it there. FYI, you can watch past discussions on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. And we also want to give you this reminder again, if you want to stay up to date on the latest local breaking news and see alerts on your phone instantly, iPhone and iPad users will need to download our new news app. Just go to the App Store and search for WWSB or My Suncoast. Android users, just disregard, because you're going to get the update automatically. We want to thank our guests for being here tonight, Sarasota City Manager Tom Barwin and Zach Murdoch of the Herald Tribune.